Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan and I'm your host of the show and executive director at CyberUp. Really excited about today's conversation. You've seen a lot of content coming out from CyberUp and me specifically around the idea of skills-based hiring and the important role we think it's going to play in the next 5 to 10 years in just the technology and cybersecurity world, and even beyond cyber to roles like accounting, engineering, teachers, educators. There's a huge push in the United States right now. So excited about our guest today. Years of experience in this space, building out programs, helping, from academic background to now corporate America, a wide range of just skills and expertise. So Helen Patton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today. I'm really happy to be here.
So Helen is a cybersecurity executive advisor over at Cisco, has done a great job of just, I think, leading and advocating for the great work that Cisco has done. We've been a great partner to CyberUp over the years. I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last several weeks, but I'd love for you to take a second, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your career and how we got here.
Sure. So I grew up in Australia, but I moved to the United States, Columbus, Ohio, specifically in the early 90s. And I was a young thing. I was a very young thing. And I ended up just accidentally getting into IT. And for those people who remember the 90s was an interesting time from a cyber perspective because we had worms come out, we had Y2K, we had all of the things. And so my boss at the time said, who was the CIO, said, it's time we had a disaster recovery plan. Helen, I want you to build it. So I was voluntold into DR planning, and I got a job at JP Morgan being a DR planner. And pretty quickly, the organization changed because that always happens. And my boss left and they offered me my boss's job. Well, my boss oversaw security, not just DR. And so I found myself accidentally in security. I was 10 years at JP Morgan doing that kind of work. I left JP Morgan to become the Chief Information Security Officer at the Ohio State University, which is a really big university. I was there for 8 years. And then I left there about 3 years ago to join Cisco. So I buck the trend in terms of I tend to stay at companies for a pretty long time. But within those companies, I usually have a pretty diverse role. I get to change jobs a lot, or I get to change my job a lot. And that's what I did at Ohio State. The program grew. The kinds of security we did changed over time. And so I've had the privilege of being around some really smart cybersecurity people for a really long time, and I love it. It's great.
I've had the pleasure of meeting quite a few great folks over at Cisco over the last couple of years, and you guys as a company have done so much, I think, for skills-based hiring and just the programs and the academies and all the offers that you've done across, for high schools to nonprofits like ours to even corporations to really provide a solid bench of courses and curriculum to learn and grow skills, which is a great precursor to today's discussion around, where do we start? Skills-based hiring, it really isn't a new concept in the grand scheme. I think as the world evolves and college education, the views of that changes and the cost has gone up and people start to reevaluate, their career paths and career options. And, it's not, we're getting beyond the days of everybody needs to go to college in order to be successful. Where I kind of lose some sleep, a little worried is that I'm worried that companies aren't thinking ahead to 5 to 10 years for when that pipeline starts to diminish and we have so many eggs in the old college recruiting basket without any type of strategy. We need to do both, right? And so the intention for us is not to say, don't do that. It really is intend do both, and you will find a much better, well-rounded workforce across your organization. So if I am a company and I'm now looking and trying to figure out all the skills-based hiring stuff, from your perspective, where do we actually start to build a skills-based hiring model for our teams?
Well, so you have to start with what you have, right? And most CISOs or most security leaders don't walk in and they're employee number one in the security team. They walk in with a team of people they already have. So you begin with understanding what your strategic plan is. So set the people and tools and processes and everything aside. What do you want your security program to achieve? What kind of business outcomes are you shooting for? What's the purpose of the security team? Let's assume you have that. then you can then hold up the people that you have and the jobs they have today and the skills that they bring to those jobs against that outcome. Now, the thing about a strategy is it's always forward looking. So as you're building a program of people and skills, you're not building for what you want today, because it takes time to bring people in, bring them up to speed and so forth. What you're really hiring for is what you want 2 or 3 years from now. Probably not more than that. Probably not less than 6 months, but there's going to be some steps in between there. The challenge is that if you just said, I need these jobs, as an industry, we do a really bad job of being clear in our definitions of what we need. So when I did vulnerability management at JP Morgan, it was done differently with different tools in a different way, using a different process, using different partners than the way we did vulnerability management at Ohio State. And it's different again at Cisco. So every organization does security in a different kind of way. So even though we're all doing vulnerability management, the job to be done, the skills that are needed for that job are going to vary, right? So one of the things the security leaders got to work out is not just what kind of roles do they need, but at a tasking level, what is the job to be done? And what kind of skills and tools and processes are going to enable that thing to happen. So it's really finicky. And a lot of security leaders sort of jump in and don't spend the time to do that. And then they go and write a job description, which is just something that they downloaded off the interwebs that somebody else had created or ChatGPT had created or whatever. And they throw that out there, and then they wonder why they get a mismatch in their hiring. So you've really got to do your homework and take the time up front to say, what are the jobs to be done, not the roles? What are the jobs to be done that I'm going to need 6 to 12 months from now? Do I have the people who can do them today? If so, great. I don't need to hire anybody, but chances are I probably don't. What's that skills gap? And then you're going to want to look for the minimum amount of skill to execute that job. Because people are going to learn on the job. You want them to have the opportunity to grow on the job. So you don't want to bring in the expert master, but you do want to bring in somebody who can competently demonstrate they understand what you're looking for. And that's how you do it at a high level.
The job description part is I think, right before we hopped on here, we were just discussing the fact that somebody made a job posting 10 or 15 years ago, and it's just been cut and pasted over and over again. Right. Which is, it's fine. You know what I mean? But I think the hard part is how do you get to the basics to really determine, okay, great. Do I need a degree? Do I need a certification? Do I need 2 to 3 years of experience? Or what are those tangibles? So
yeah.
What's a good strategy that you would recommend for those hiring managers to not have bad job descriptions, and actually make descriptions that are in tune and based in reality to what you just said a little bit ago around the minimum product or minimum need here, to get it with the expectation that you probably have an organization that can grow that person right along the way.
Right.
So, what advice would you give to write better job
descriptions? I've stood up in front of people before and said, if you've got a job description with more than 3 requirements, it's probably wrong. It's probably too big. And I stand by that, even though people roll their eyes at me when I say it. For most jobs in security, and I'm talking here about mid to junior level roles. Senior level roles, okay, I'll give it to you. Maybe there's a couple more requirements. But in general, here's what you need out of an employee. You need someone who understands the basics of the role. And if you've defined the role very easily, that means probably a functional understanding of some functional part of cybersecurity. I understand what it means to do identity and access management, or I understand what it means to be a SOC analyst, or so forth. So there's a functional requirement, number one. Number two, you're going to need that person to work with humans. So there is the no asshole rule. So you can call it in better language, I want somebody who's going to work well in a team. I'm going to want somebody who understands how to get along with other people and so forth. But you want somebody who, when they come to the office, people are happy that they're there and that they add to the overall outcome of the team because they're there. So functional expertise, interpersonal expertise. And then you need somebody who's got an understanding that their job is not going to stay the same. So some people say a continuous learning mindset, some people call it curiosity, but the willingness and the delight in knowing that they're going to have to keep learning to stay on top of things, that's the third requirement. So there's your three for any job. Do you need a degree for functionally? The answer is always no, you don't. Now, what we've done from a hiring perspective is to say a 2-year degree is a proxy for functional knowledge. A 4-year degree is a proxy for functional knowledge plus humanity, typically. So where you see companies that say you need a 4-year degree, what they're really saying is you need functional knowledge and you need to be a human. But functionally, I don't think anybody actually really needs a degree. Now, the one thing I will say is that in certain industries and certain kinds of security roles, it is helpful to have certain kinds of experiences, which is not the same thing as a skill. An experience could be, I've worked in retail, not I've worked a retail security incident, but I understand how retail works, or I understand how banking works. I have experience in that vertical. It could be an experience like I have participated in an incident. And so I've worked an incident before. And certainly if you're hiring an incident manager, you want someone who's worked an incident before, those kinds of things. So there are experiences, but they're different than skills. And it's reasonable to think that that would show up in a job description sometimes as well. But the more junior the role, the fewer requirements and the fewer experiences they should be, because the expectation should be that people are going to get that on the job.
And what do you feel, and this is going to be a two-parter, do you feel that process belongs to the talent folks or the security folks, right? Because there really is there's a team effort between those two, right? Where they have to work hand in hand. But in your experience, who drives the train on like, we want to make this conscious decision to shift this, and then because you described a pretty big process there of like hiring managers and talent folks and coming together to better inform that. Who leads that, or who should lead that?
It's a really good question. My first response is it's got to be an equal partnership, because an HR person can't understand or know what's needed in a security employee. But conversely, the security person is not trained on what's required when it comes to laws and regulations and company policy around HR and hiring and recruiting and all of the things. So it's got to be a partnership. But in general, I'd say it's really up to the security leader or the security hiring manager to be accountable for making sure that all those things happen, that the skills evaluation, the jobs to be done, the thinking about where you're going to go to look for talent, even. Ultimately, I think the security leader is accountable because it's their program and it's going to be their team and it's going to be their outcomes that they're on the hook for. So they should still be accountable for the hiring process as well.
Yeah. I feel like you would inform the talent folks and say, this is the strategy and process I really want to see. Go create a plan that fits within your bucket. Let's come together and agree upon what makes sense.
Right.
And then you roll it out. So then kind of the second part of that question is how. So we go through and do it, right? The CISO and the top HR person. We've created this thing that's a good idea at the top level, but now we got to get a group of other people on board to say this is important. How do you then transition the early stage to create a culture of a team that's really embracing the idea of skills-based hiring, because it does require all people involved to participate.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go down the path of skills-based hiring, and I think you should, but if you're going to do it, just like any other program as a leader, you've got to be really clear and vocal about why you think it's valuable to do it and to bring people along for that ride. Like, you've got to sell them on the vision of why this is important. So theoretically, as a leader, you are going to have a set of team values that you would manage your team that informs the way you manage your team. It informs the way the team works. You should line up this skills-based hiring initiative against those values. So if you have values like you want to be the smartest security. I don't know what your values are. Smartest security team, a great place to work, a whatever, a this or a that. Everyone's got 3 or 4 values that they sort of, put on the wall. You should be able to say the reason we're doing skills-based hiring is because it supports all of these values. If you can't do that, then either your values are wrong or skills-based hiring isn't something that you need to do. You'll just go out. I don't know how you hire if you don't do it skills-based, but okay. You just need to line it up against the values. That's how you sell it. Now, if you've got people who push back against skills-based hiring, then it's incumbent on them to say, I don't think this aligns to the values and this is why. And maybe they're right. And maybe you have to take that into account. Or maybe they say, I don't like the values. Well, now you've got a whole different problem. They shouldn't be part of the team. That's a whole different issue, right? But just like anything else that you're doing in your security program, this is part of your security program. And so you got to lead that way.
So we've gotten to the point, we've got a team supporting skills-based hiring. We've got well-written job descriptions, right? That we can now go outwardly and say, we're here, come apply.
Yeah.
But now we got to go find out where, right? So, we represent non-traditional. You worked at the Ohio State. Make sure I get it right. The Ohio State.
Thank you.
So there's lots of great opportunities to find partners. Where should those companies now? We've laid the groundwork. Where do they kind of lean into maybe partnerships or whatnot to find those people, right? Outside of just the old, here's Indeed or here's our, whatever Workday job posting, and now we get 500 resumes. That's fine, but is that really working? Where do they go from there?
So I think companies need to think really hard about where they get their talent from, because especially in security, we got a couple of things going on. One, we've got a diversity problem, and I don't just mean we've got a diversity of gender problem or a diversity of race problem or however you classify that. We've got a diversity of thought problem, right? So you've got to look at the team you currently have, and you've got to evaluate whether or not you feel like the mix of the skills you've got, the backgrounds you've got, the experiences that you've got, whether that mix is right. If it is, keep doing what you're doing in terms of where you go looking for talent. But if it's not, then thinking about what is it you're looking for in this job, this particular job you're going to post for, what kinds of experiences, what kinds of skills, where are you going to find that? And then go looking for those things. So you're right. From a diversity perspective, if you just slap something up on a job board, one single job board, you're not going to get a diverse candidate slate. So targeting where you're posting your jobs is certainly one thing. The other problem in the security industry is we've actually got a dearth of people. Let me try that again. What we've got in the security industry is we've got lots of people who want entry-level jobs that require, quote unquote, no experience. So for every job posting you put out there that says we don't require security experience, you're going to get hundreds of candidates. That is not where we have a pipeline problem. Where we have a pipeline problem is in the 5 to 10 years of work experience / security experience kind of range. So what you're looking for then are candidates who have experiences working in other verticals or other fields or other parts of security or technology, and you're going to want to transfer them laterally into the roles that you're looking for. So going to places like organizations that help people coming from the military is a great place to start. If you're looking for a training and awareness person, maybe you're going to go and look at teaching academies and people who've been in the teaching field. If you're looking for somebody who's really great at auditing and controls, maybe you're going to go look in banking or finance to find people who are looking to career change out of being an accountant, for example. There's a whole bunch of places like that you're going to need to look at. But again, it's going to take intention, and it's going to take planning partnership between you and your HR partners and your recruiting teams, because they won't know where to go look either. You're going to have to help them. But looking for that mid-career, I've already been in the workforce for 5 to 10 years kind of role is actually where we're having the most trouble hiring right now, where skills-based hiring is going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I've always kind of pushed, and CyberSec's great, and I know there's a lot of good data on there, but I don't feel like we have enough data around that 5 to 10 year mark of people. of a comparison. If we have this many roles and this many people, where like I think it's hard for an organization to make a decision. If there are 1,000 roles and I only have 500 people, well, we can't all snap our fingers and here's 5 to 10. So you've got to really reimagine the job descriptions. And I really liked your advice earlier around, if you've got more than 3 or 4 tasks for a person, it probably should be 2 jobs in the grand scheme of things. So that really supports, and I think all too often for organizations like for Cyber, like you do have the ability to save cash through an apprenticeship model, or because it's a little more cost effective for somebody you're hiring in to maybe get 2 people for the price of 1 in this scenario, then you could actually grow the overall headcount. The only challenge I've ever really run into with that with employers is getting the approval for the additional headcount, because it's such a big thing for corporate America. Like, you get 50, doesn't matter salary range, that you get 50, no more than 50.
Right.
But what if I add 51? But we, keep the payroll. No, it doesn't work that way. I wish it doesn't work that way. But that's an important piece. I know I've talked to a lot of employers over the years, and many that have started to go down this journey and really start to think through it. And they all have little different challenges, right? Some get 500 resumes, some get 4, right? It depends on the popularity of the company, what you said a second ago, just job requirements. So I'm confident and agree with you that if there's an entry-level job, because there's groups of people on LinkedIn that share them pretty frequently, that they're getting 500 to 2,000 resumes per. How does a company decipher 2,000 resumes fair and equitably to really make sure they're going to get the best talent in their interviewing process?
Yeah, so this is where I've never been a recruiter or an HR partner to give you an authoritative answer to this one. I will tell you, as a hiring manager, I am always going to prioritize someone who has a good referral over someone who doesn't. Like, even if my recruiting team goes through and filters a whole bunch of resumes out and they give me a top 5, if I had somebody who was referred to me by some trusted partner or some trusted employee, I'm probably going to take a look at that person anyway. So I do think one of the conversations that needs to happen between the hiring manager and the recruiting team is, what is the preference criteria that the hiring manager is going to look for, that's going to allow the recruiting teams to sort through the kinds of resumes they have, especially when you've got a job that requires no cybersecurity experience. Obviously, then your differentiating factor are the professional skills, not the technical skills, that are going to go along with that particular role. But it's really hard to look on paper and evaluate one person's, teamwork capabilities compared to another. So you then look at those external things, like, are they referred to you by a trusted person? Do they have extracurricular activities somewhere, either in their cover letter or on their resume, that suggests to you that the way they think or the kinds of things that they like to do are going to be a good fit for this role and for your team, all of those kinds of things. But I know that there are algorithms that take those 1,000 resumes and bring them down to a manageable human number. But I don't know how I don't know a better way to slice and dice that.
I feel like a lot of it is KPIs, and it's impossible to put parameters on KPIs and to be inclusive. In the grand scheme, it's really hard to give everybody a fair shot if you're saying X, Y, Z. But as you create the job descriptions, you need this degree or this certification. It really is a weed out. So not in a bad, because you have to have a standard. I would never argue that you have to have your standard that you're looking for, regardless of degree or not degree, and that's okay.
You have to have a standard. I think where we've got it wrong in the past, though, is the way we've written the requirements have been written in such a way that candidates who have those things have self-selected out. And so the candidate pool that you're left to select from isn't as diverse as you might want it to be. So, for example, this is an old trope, but there's some truth to it. Back in the early 2000s, if I saw a job description that says you need to be a rock star, I would say, I'm not a rock star. I'm not going to apply for that. And I don't want to be seen as a rock star. I'm not going to apply for that job. The hiring manager didn't really want a rock star. What they wanted was someone who was highly competent. Now, if they'd have used the words highly competent, I would have gone, yeah, I'm highly competent. I'm going to apply for the job, right? So it's not that the standards have been lowered. It's not that we're not asking for things that we really need. It's not any of those things, but it's being really intentional about the language that's being used and the context in which you're using it and the kinds of places you're showing up and the kinds of language you're using in those places, and making sure that it's not presenting barriers to candidates so that they don't choose to apply. Like, I think it's not a problem to have 1,000 resumes. I think it's a problem to have 4. So what do you have to do to get more than 4, right?
Yeah. There are gender biases towards what you just described, right?
Right.
Women are way more, if it says they can't do it, to not apply, where men are a little bit more, we'll wing it and figure it out and apply, right? So right. I know there's some gender normatives to that, of just line of thinking.
Yeah.
I know for me, when I got out of the military, I was oblivious. I had no idea what half the jobs meant. So I applied for everything. I think I applied for the CEO of Anheuser-Busch at one point, maybe, right? Like, I was like, I read it. I could do that job. I had no idea what that was. I didn't learn any of that in the military. So, my blindness to reality was just kind of masked and just applying for all the things in hopes that I would get a job. So, and I don't think that's abnormal. I know, like, I still volunteer with the group Nice Nest and their apprenticeship community of interest. And I'm always blown away to find the people, right? These are students from across the world that somehow or another find this group, and it's going to be the thing that helps them find a job, which isn't really the intent of the job or what the group is to do. But people are going to find what they want to find in the thing and come and participate and really hope that it is what they want. So
that's right.
We could set up parameters and guardrails and bumpers and all the stuff for job postings and events, and people will still come in to do it. But it just doesn't mean we just don't try. I guess is the important part. That's right. Is just to not try.
Right.
From a hiring manager piece. So now we've got great job descriptions. We've got a team on board who's embraced the skills-based hiring. Yep. We're getting applicants into the pool, and things are going well. So what things should we be doing to sustain that overall best practice? Because I know from experience from our hiring employers, it's an ongoing discussion, right? Because it does add a little bit more work to everybody. So it is always an ongoing discussion. So how do you continue to sustain that culture of skills-based hiring and really lean into it for the foreseeable future?
So I'm a big proponent of an apprenticeship model of learning that extends through your entire career. So rather than thinking of cybersecurity education as something that you do once in a classroom, and then you go and you continue to learn on the job as stuff is thrown at you, I think the leadership of a security organization should think about people who are early career, mid-career, late career, and work out what kinds of resourcing support they need with looking at it through the lens of how do you give back into your organization, into your team? How do you mentor? So what does that look like? So somebody who's coming into a very junior level position, you're not going to assume that they have a whole lot of work experience, even if they've done a lot of boot camps or they've got a degree or they've attended a lot of capture the flags or whatever. So on the job, as part of their role, one, you get them a mentor who is a couple of years ahead of them in their career path, not the CISO who's been out of the water for the last 15 years or 20 years, but get somebody who's been in their shoes within the last 2 to 3 years. Make them a mentor in. And to the extent that you can then job shadow, I know it's hard to do when everyone's remote, but where you have them work side by side, shoulder to shoulder in an apprenticeship kind of way, you're going to do that. Certainly you want to still send them off to conferences and you want to send them to training and that kind of stuff. But making time in their day-to-day to learn from somewhere else is really important. At the mid-career level, now people are making decisions about, do they want to go deep as an individual contributor but as a technical subject matter expert, or do they want to go into the management track or some combination of the two. And so thinking about, okay, you're not an apprentice anymore, you're sort of more in a journeyman kind of role. You're going to start focusing on one or two things that you want to become really excellent at. And so what does that training look like? What does that mentoring look like? What is those skills that are needed to be really excellent at something? Like, let's be clear about that, make sure that that's part of their dev plan. And then for the leaders of the team, the people who are most senior, now in that apprenticeship model, they're the masters or the leaders, if you will. And so they're looking at things like, you should be expecting them not only to be doing a good job for your own company, but they should be doing a good job for the industry. They should be externally focused in how they share their skills. So what kind of training do they need for that, right? So I think thinking about skills-based learning as something that happens in every step of your career, not just something that you do to land a job, then infuses what is the talent development process that you have going on in your team. And often we forget about people as soon as they walk in the door, and we then go, your career plan is really up to you. And I think that's a mistake, and I think we lose talent when we do stuff like that. So we've got to continuously invest that way.
I know some of our employer partners have taken that skills-based hiring and then one step further to really map out career ladders for their organization, which really helps what you just described, right?
Mm-hmm.
How, if I want a career plan within this organization and find my mentors, having that kind of prescribed out and open for us all to see gives me a lot of opportunity. It's going to help my retention, for the company. I'm going to stay, and I know I can learn and grow, because I think most people get in, they have a sense of what they want to do, but at the end of the day, really don't know because they've never done it before.
Right.
And they get in, figure it out, and they start to look for the next path. And they're going to either say, can I find it here, or I need to go somewhere else? And like that, I don't know that I've necessarily got into people that are leaving exclusively for money. I know what happens. I've not met somebody that's just like, they're more around like, okay, I want to learn this skill and I can get it there and I want to go do that. So, taking the money piece out of it, because we all know the money comes. If you show up and do the work, you're going to have an opportunity to have a really good career and make a good amount of money that's going to support whatever you would need. Within reason, of course, right? Unless you're driving Lambos and Ferraris, then maybe that's a little different. But in the grand scheme, you're going to have a good quality of life, and you can find your way. Everybody gets the same last question. 30 minutes went fast, as it always does. But what advice would you give to those looking to level up their cybersecurity career?
Network. Number one, always network. And network can be something that you do online in Reddit threads, in LinkedIn chat groups, in those kinds of things. But get people knowing who you are and what you're working on and what you're thinking about. Even if you don't think other people want to know, there's other people who want to know, and they're going to appreciate that you're willing to put stuff out there. So get known digitally, but get known if you can. Not everyone's in a good geography, but if you can, network in person as well. Attend local conferences, attend local meetups, get to know what people are doing around you. You can use that either to move to a role outside of the company you're already in or the organization you're already a part of, or you can use it to level up within the company that you already are and maybe take on a bigger role or an expanded role. So network.
Always good ideas. Well, Helen, thank you so much for joining today. I really enjoyed the discussion around skills-based hiring, especially around the company perspective, because it is so important. I know a lot of times we talk around the individual kind of contributing side of this and their role, but for me, it really is a three-pronged kind of three-headed monster. It's individuals are responsible for what they need to do. Employers are definitely responsible for their hiring practices. And I think that the training organizations, us or traditional or not traditional, play a role in this. And we've got to get better at how we're preparing folks and interacting with those hiring partners. Like, what do you need, and trying to build out systems and frameworks that help and really try to grow the workforce. So thankful for Cisco for being a part of that equation, right? An important part of that, of just growing the skills, and definitely for your time and, just getting over the last couple of weeks. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. We have some really great shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. So excited to continue the great discussion around cybersecurity and skills-based hiring. So have a great week, everybody. And until next time, see you soon.